Okay, we are live now. Thank
Hello.
you. Cheers, everyone, for
Th-
tuning in.
Thank you, Studio B.
There was some rerun going on. Now it's all good, so we're live. I have Mike, 13thMonkey, with me today. A usual guest. I have had him on how many times now, Mike? Was it for the first one?
First and the second one, I think.
Um,
I don't remember specifically. I'm not too occupied with the thing called time. It just happened.
oh,
I don't have much with the whole deal of time. It just happens, Can't do much about it.
yeah,
So
right.
yeah, I think I was there for the first and the second show, and this is the fourth. Fifth?
Well, you're talking about the one with Bridget, are you not? Or because I was referring to the first and the second episode because I've been away for the last 2 Saturdays because I was on a plane, first from Denmark to France and from France to Denmark, exactly in my airtime, which was kind of unfortunate,
Spiffy
but now
plan.
I'm back. Yeah, I had fun time skiing in the Alps. Mike and I have been researching Starforts for a while, and actually, when I went skiing, I went and visited a Starfort in 3,000 meters of elevation in the Alps, which was kind of crazy. But I couldn't go into the fort because they said the foundation of the fort was unstable, which is also rather odd, seeing as it is rested on a mountain. And it even had bastion points going out on the mountainside with a straight drop, which is also rather odd because they say that the bastion points are for the dead zones that they create when enemies storm a fort. They have these dead zones. So a star fort accomplish no dead zones because you can see all from all angles on top of the fort. You can see the whole all way around. So they cannot hide in the angles, which is the whole idea of the military narrative, which is kind of odd when you see that on the side of a mountain. Why would you have that up there? Because no one is gonna storm your fort from, they're not gonna be mountain climbers going up there, and you need dead zones for that. That's just crazy. What do you think about that, Mike? The Alpine forts?
We got a whole bunch of them. That is for sure. I'm just looking at the one that you visited, which is on a mountain ridge 2 kilometers from the border of Italy.
Yeah, also yeah, and I could walk around it on one of the sides. It's you take the lift up, and it's just right by a skiing slope, and you can walk around like 50% of it. But to the other side of the fort, it's just a straight drop down to it's the Italy side of the fort, and it has bastions, uh, basically in the middle of the air, if you know what I mean, because there's nothing below it, which is crazy. But
It sort of defeats the narrative of the
of
Bastion Point. Why would you go and attack a Bastion Point or create blind sights on a sheer drop? It leads you
yeah,
to believe that the whole Bastion Point had something else in.
yeah,
Um,
it's used for something else. Yeah, I'd agree. It
had it.
had
Sorry, I
something.
was looking for. I had a different purpose altogether.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I agree with that. We're just looking for that purpose. We have a lot of ideas, but it's hard to pin down the exact use of the Bastion. But actually, on the topic of Starforts, Mike and I and Fenton and Colm Gibney have joined forces, all of us now, which perhaps would be the four guys who have, let's say, labored the most in the Starfort area.
Yeah, to those unfamiliar, Colm Gibney makes quite excellent Starfort videos on YouTube. If you just look for the channel Colm Gibney.
Yep.
That is the man that set me on my path of hunting Starforts, a little over a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he also said Fenton hunting. And I was, before any of you guys, looking a bit into it through Martin Littke and also through Nuev channel, but it was very, superficially, I learned about them, and I just think just after that, Colm came out with his videos. And,
I think Colm's been searching for the best part of 5 years altogether.
Yeah, so he knew before that also. Mm-hmm. He just hadn't made any videos yet.
Yeah, that's it.
But as I said, we the four of us have joined forces now, because there's no doubt that Mike, in his space of time knowing about Starforts, Mike has mapped well over 5,000 different Starforts in the world on Google Earth, which far surpasses anyone else. Not that Colm and Fenton haven't done a really great part of the work as well, but there's no doubt that you have really taken the toll in that area. And I have been assisting you by finding the maps in the archives. So really nerdy and a lot of slave work, so to speak. But right now in the making, we have joined up with Fenton, who is you perhaps you can explain it better, because he only recently
Fenton,
added me to the list of people who can access.
Fenton is the owner of Starforts.org, a website,
exactly,
which currently hosts Colm's KMC file, in which there are, well, I think, near 1,100 Starforts marked. And we're currently working on publishing mine, which will contain all of the old maps that you have found, tied to the star location. So if you click on one of the star locations, you will see one of the old maps, if available, pop up, and you can see how the city used to look.
Yeah.
So that's
the
Colm. He's the owner of Starfort.org and the server that hosts all of the old maps. And most of these old maps have been gathered by Victor and a couple of other people on the Discord, actually. Einar's done a bunch of work with that. Hexen Basin has done some excellent work in the German area. Ranty does a lot of stuff in
Shout
America
out to
now.
Those guys and Ranty.
So the work on the Starforts is definitely growing, and with this new map coming out, we can definitely show the people how much of these things there are, and this is an ongoing project. What will be published is unfinished, but in a workable state.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing project that will probably never see the end as long as there are archives to uncover. And basically empty places on the map are just an indication of us not having looked there, or not having had the time to go over all of the region maps that have been mostly collected by you. They contain a wealth of information when it comes to old cities that were fortified in the past. Germany and France
some of the crazier ones, Mike, of the greater, I have only seen them on region maps, but London and Constantinople were once in the ancient past large Starforts.
London, we have some old maps of that indicate that. Constantinople, definitely. That whole area.
I think three of four even. to confirm to Constantinople. I even found one for Buenos Aires. Did you ever see that one?
Yeah, I got Buenos Aires marked in a couple of maps of Buenos Aires. That is
Which
Rio
is
de
crazy.
Janeiro, and then we have the other one.
Yep, so the
Yeah, Rio de
large,
Janeiro,
all the
Buenos Aires.
capitals of South
It's funny that
America.
that is one thing that you ought to wonder as even a novice map researcher. Why are all the capitals of countries marked with a star? And this is a tradition going back like to old atlases even,
Yep,
where the capital
even the Jesuits did it.
marked
And
the capital was always
you'll have
marked with a star.
atlases. Yeah, you even have atlases showing where you have one region map where they show the stars, and then you'll have another region map for the same place where they don't show the stars. So there was a distinction between the maps. Some maps show stars and other maps don't. And the star maps, there are a lot of them made by the Jesuits. Also, of course, not the Jesuits, but a lot of it are from the Jesuits, which is rather interesting. And they had a interest, it would seem, in Starforts. But how could you not when in the 1600s Europe or the 1500s Europe, where could you go and not know or see star fortifications? They were everywhere, man.
Everywhere. Just these small regions of Germany that I have gone over and filled in.
Yeah,
Those two maps that I was pointed probably at again by Naya.
yeah,
She showed me these maps and I just went over them as a sort of a favor of the matter, really, because who has the time to go over a region map? Well, I did, and then promptly filled in about 50 stars.
yeah. 50.
Yeah,
Yep.
like it just went on like plop 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 plop. And like I said, all we if you see an empty area on the map, that just means that we haven't found an old map of that area. I haven't gone over that area properly because they are everywhere. It really
Yeah.
doesn't matter where you go; they are everywhere.
Yep.
And of
And it's
course, now people will say, "But what about the South Pole?" Yeah, South Pole is covered in snow. Good luck.
yeah. But do you remember that map where it was, of Schlaraffenland, which is a mythical place, but the
Yeah,
map
that's
was highly
north, isn't it?
detailed.
Isn't that north?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to the south, you had it said Tartaria, and you had cities denoting like the devil and hell, and to the
Mm-hmm.
north you had the Holy Land, and there was a land bridge between what would be Northern Asia, Tartaria, and the Holy Land to the north, even further, Hyperborea, or
Yeah,
what
it,
have you.
it isn't that in the same location as what we now call Nova Zembla?
Yeah, some or perhaps a bit more to the east, because the area called Tenduk of that would be the northernmost part of Siberia, northeastern
Yeah, I
part of
got you.
Siberia,
Yeah.
that used to extend further up north, at least on the maps. And in one of the maps, it touches the North Pole. So that would be perhaps that place. And what was interesting about the map, it was compiled by either Mercator or someone close to him. I remember a Danish cartographer called Meyer about this, but I'll have to brush that up. Um, he showed this map, and it could be of Tenduk, part of Tartaria, but it said Tartaria to the south and the Holy Land to the north, and between those two places on the land bridge, there was a highly detailed map detailing cities and starforts. So starforts on the North Pole, kinda, is what this map shows. But when I showed it to Hexenbesen, it was a German map, and a lot of the cities on this Tartarian map was understood in German. And he said he laughed at it because some of them the names were silly,
Yeah.
like Fool's Land or
Yeah, I remember that one.
yeah, it was really odd, but it has definitely got me thinking because the map also claimed to be accurate, and Hexenbesen was claiming it was obviously a joke or something else. And I said, yeah, that was the given narrative, that it was kind of a joke. But I couldn't really find any answers or any explanations for why you would call a joke map an accurate description, because it says so on the title, on the map, even written by their hand, an accurate description of Schlaraffenland. And Schlaraffenland in Danish means land of plenty. It's also known as the land of cocaine in myths and legends, which would be a land where you wouldn't have to worry about anything. Everything was supplied, and there was no government, but yet there was no anarchy either, because there was like everything was just in harmony. That's the idea. So could these maps actually be of Tenduk from an ancient time, is actually what I'm wondering, because what I also wonder about is there's a lot of Danish cartographers involved around mapping the northernmost areas of the world, especially northern Tartaria. And another one is Bering, as we know, the Bering Strait.
Bering Strait, yep.
Yep. So maybe there was a Danish tradition, and there was definitely an involvement between the Danish cartographer Meyer and Mercator. And we all know Mercator's map of the North Pole with the 4 islands and the inland sea and the mountain in the middle, the magnetic mountain. Well, that is very interesting, because there was also some literary evidence where he, I think it was John Dee who sent some monks up there, and they reported basically the same thing back to him. 4 islands, an inland sea, and a large mountain in the middle. So could there really be such a place? Would be interesting to have that confirmed in our lifetime, because it seems that the governments of the world are not interested in anyone going up there, or to the South Pole for that
I was
matter.
about to say, and neither are they to the South, right? That is sort of like, yeah, you could go to the South Pole and you can touch land if you pay $10,000 and you stick to the rules.
Yep, it's off limits to what is it, the 60th degree south on latitude?
Yeah, like I said, unless you stick to the rules that they have given you, like you can go to this piece of land and you can walk about, because, well, we pretty much made sure that we cleared that whole area of anything suspicious.
Yep.
That may be there. There you go. Like you can walk on the edge, and the moment you want to go inland, hey, no sir, no, that's way too dangerous.
Yeah, and they claim the main reason is for environmental protection, as you have seen perhaps the movie Happy Feet, with all the happy little penguins and how they need their fish for survival. And if we need to keep people out beyond the 60th degree latitude to the south, because otherwise we'll fish too much in that area and all the penguins will die. And that has been a very bonding concern between all sorts of governments for over 60 years, since the Antarctic Treaty was executed and put in place. It's in diplomacy, it's the most successful treaty ever, and probably will never be surpassed in our lifetime, because it's still going strong, and it has, countries that should be enemies and hating each other, agreeing upon keeping people out of Antarctica for over 60 years, whilst also being engaged in war, which is blowing the war paradigm straight out the bat, I'd say. Because how can you have a treaty with someone you are at war with?
Just make sure that nobody goes to Antarctica.
Yep. It just
And
seems
it goes past
contradictory.
it goes past any shape narrative.
Mm, yeah,
You don't even have to bring that in. I just did, but you don't
you
have to
just
bring
did.
that in. I
You
did. I
you
did.
invoked he who we should not name. Let's not talk about Voldemort.
No, that's okay. Let's not. But yeah, regardless of that, you don't even have to take that into account, and you know you're not going anyplace on the South Pole soon.
Yep, right. You're not going there. They will stop you, as in the case of Jarl Anderhøj, a Norwegian who tried to defy the Antarctic Treaty and learned his lesson pretty abruptly and with force. It's an interesting story, can be looked into. Jarl Anderhøj. Yeah, so Antarctica and the North Pole off limits. Well, you could. I think it would be easier to breach the North Pole.
The North Pole has been visited by a bunch of people. At least the magnetic North Pole has.
Yeah, the magnetic. Yeah.
Top Gear went there, I think, in 2008, sort of disproving Al Gore's claim of global warming because, well, how can you take a car to the North Pole if the North Pole has melted? Yeah, melted.
Well, it would seem that we're talking about extreme cooling and extreme warming, that the thing about it is that it's not global, it's local. So you have local warming and local cooling in certain places. That is my observation. And just, it's a very simple one. Like, for instance, the northern part of Antarctica down by the Chile tip seems to be melting, while other places seems to be freezing. And they're all supposed to be, well, according to a lot of so-called scientists, quote unquote, it's all supposed to be, melting or going in one direction. And according to other climatologists or whatnot, it's all supposed to be freezing. So I think they decided to go with changing, climate changing instead of freezing or warming.
Yep.
Yeah. So
That's why the whole terminology changed into climate change and not climate warming.
right. And my point was that the whole thing about it is that it seems to be local, both warming and cooling. So the thing about it, the Danish weather has not really changed that much. Like, let's get real about it. I would think that that's the same thing about Holland or the Netherlands.
Yeah, no, the Dutch weather hasn't changed all that much. It's just the same shitty stuff it's always been.
Yep. Like, it's not really a big fuss, but you can, if the media gets into your mind, it's all, they make a
Doom and
whole
gloom.
lot out of a little.
Doom and gloom.
Yep, doom and gloom. Yep, and you have a little girl. Let's also be honest about that. A little girl appealing to the emotions and getting children to strike and get out of school, Extinction Rebellion and whatnot. And what should all these people be doing instead is my question. Like anything else than that, perhaps. I like the appeal to politicians, like to do a job, but like in the history of appealing to politicians in the 19th and the 20th and the 21st century, can we substantiate that as a good idea?
It's a bit useless, isn't it? Everything has been predetermined for you. Like, this is going to happen. This is the politician in charge. This is the man we need because he's making those in charge the most money.
You wanna hear something very interesting about the Danish situation in politics?
Sure.
Do you know what the form of government in Denmark is?
I can't say I do.
Well, if you
is
ask
it a
anybody,
democracy? Like,
yeah, that's the claimed form of governance in Denmark. So intuitively, if I were to ask you, how would you prove what form of government you have in Holland? Like, how would you document that? What source of documentation would you use?
The internet, I guess.
Well, maybe I'm asking I could ask in another way. Would you perhaps use the constitutional law document that you have in your country to
Oh,
state
right.
which form
Yeah,
of
in
government?
that fashion. Sorry, Saturday evening.
It's
Yeah,
okay,
like
mate.
yeah, by going by the constitutional law, right? This constitutional law is set up and states that we, the people, have an influence over who gets to quote unquote rule us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I would do in Denmark as well. And well, we have a situation where everyone says we have a democracy, but if I were to go to our constitutional law, the word democracy is not mentioned once. Isn't that interesting? So I ask people sometimes, how can you have a democracy when the word is not used in the constitutional law? Like it's not mentioned once. Not even like some sort of parliamentarism. So how is that possible? And it stuns people usually because how would you answer that? But it says that our form of governance is monarchism. We have a monarchy, as you can see, we have a queen, which is rather obvious, but she has kind of gotten people to think that apparently that she's not ruling the country and we have a democracy. It's quite clever, I'd say, if you really don't want to know people, like if you don't want people to know who is ruling, you make a circus like that and tell the people that you're just because of old traditions, like you're just a decoration basically. That's the narrative, and it's quite clever. People buy it. It's easy to buy, I'd say, because
Well,
how
yeah,
would you? Yeah,
that's like how I told my mother why I don't go and vote for a politician.
yeah.
She
Well,
asked me for my voting pass, which is keep in mind legal in the Netherlands. You can give away your voting pass to someone else to vote for you. So my mom came to me, and this person has to be direct family, I believe. But anyway, she comes to me and you're not going to vote, are you? I'm like, no, I'm not. Can I have your voting pass? No, you cannot, because I do not trust my government, so I do not vote for them.
yeah.
And
Well,
she looks at me and she didn't really understand it, so I took a little time to try and explain it further by asking, like, Mom, who do you vote for? And she mentions Emil Roemer, which is a left-wing politician in the Netherlands. And I'm like, that's very nice, Mom. He will definitely like that. However, do you know him? And she looks at me a bit queasy, like, do I know him? Yes, I know him. I'm like, no, I don't mean like that. Do you know him? Do you know him? Does he come by at night, hold your hand, and tell you that everything is going to be all right with the world? And she looks at me funny again. She laughs a bit, like, no. Like, and in that case, Emil doesn't give a single hoot about you. I'm going to keep it nicely there. He doesn't give a single hoot about you because he doesn't know you. What do you mean? Well, Mom, like I said, does he hold your hand at night and tell you that he's going to change the country for the better for you and everybody else? No, he doesn't. He has a sphere of influence, and he has a family circle that he cares about, that he knows and wants to take care of, regardless of what happens. And those are the people he wants to change the country for, because he doesn't know you. He has no idea who you are, Mom. Not a single bit of him is focused on you. He's just happy that you are gullible enough to vote for him.
yep. That's
And that's
very
politics in
honest.
a nutshell.
Very honest. I couldn't have said it like better. And you don't even need to appeal to any type of, oh, he's a criminal or he's lying, or it's just the basic foundation of, or let's say the metaphysics of politics and voting just dictates that they're not gonna care about you specifically. So why would you ever do it?
That's it.
Well, you can just, well, some say that, okay, they cannot care for you specifically, but it's better to rally behind someone who's going to lead a way in a certain place. Well, that would be good if you were rallying behind who's going to be the next dictator, but you're not.
Hmm.
You're rallying behind who's shared power. So power is going to be shared, and they're all going to be an infinite number of compromises to what the original goal was that
Yeah,
captured you.
they have to, because they have to rule with their opposition to keep that whole system afloat to begin with.
Yeah, it's without the cold, you don't have the heat. Without the heat, you don't have the cold. As is
That's
in
it.
politics, it needs an opposition. And I've even in the conspiracy
Mm.
movement, they even talk about
Politics
you need a
doesn't necessarily require the opposition, because like you just said, if there is no opposition, you got a dictatorship. That's a form of politics.
well, even a dictatorship needs an opposition, Mike. That's what I was getting to. You need a rebellion, you need a resistance, because it's just, I guess it's
Yeah,
based on
but then
the
it's
old
not.
Hermetic ideas of you can never get out of binarity or a binary world or
No,
duality.
that's fair enough. But then the rebellion would not be part of the political system, but purely against that form of politics.
Well, it's still part of the system because, as Lenin once said, the best form of opposition is the one you lead yourself. And they needed to lead an opposition themselves, because if the people is not gonna muster up any resistance, they'll do it for them, because they need a bit of resistance to their political ideology. Otherwise, it will all collapse very soon.
Who was
That you
that?
can,
Trotsky, who said that we will lead every revolution against us.
yep, yep, that's the idea. It's it's also they take it on to the full max, right? They want to use that principle to steer the future, but like it's also
Star
still
Wars just
something
became.
that will happen eventually. Like it's a fact of, let's say, nature. Like you cannot have one without the other.
Star
There's
Wars
always
just
going
became
to
a whole
be.
lot more questionable, doesn't it?
Well, it's some say dialectics, I say metaphysics. They just use the metaphysics to their gain, which is the dialectic, kinda. That is the metaphysics put in use, or the knowledge of it, which is rather useful. I'd say it's smart. I get why you would do it. It's like it's observed always, and you should try and gain. You should work with the laws of nature to your advantage and not against them. So I guess that's what they're doing. Their intentions are just domination. It would
Yeah,
seem
of
very
course,
basically.
this is probably kept out of the media, but I've never heard of like any of such an establishment in North Korea. And this just popped into my head, like.
That would be perhaps a very good example of an exception, but there would be natural resistance in the people. We don't hear about it,
That's
and they
it.
will get
Like
killed.
that's what I said. Like it's probably kept out of the media, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but
a bunch of people took cameras into North Korea illegally, and you do sort of see like a destitute people, but you don't really see any resistance against what's happening for real, because all these people have been, and that this is the vision it gives, right? I'm not
hmm
saying there isn't any of that happening, but
but if
it
that's
really gives
true,
off the image of a totally oppressed people. Like, if I don't do what I've been told, I may end up being execution or something like that.
mhm. Yeah, but if that's true, that he really has annihilated all forms of resistance, then I guess that the next thing that will follow is that the country will dissolve. It's like in the Matrix in the last movie when everybody becomes Agent Smith and it's only Neo left,
Hmm.
and he also becomes Agent Smith. That's when you hit the singularity and all resets. And that would be the case with North Korea if there's no resistance. It won't go on because it will just it won't survive because it needs a resistance, the form of government to thrive and to be what it is and to justify its existence. And when it doesn't have that, it will need to go either into war against neighboring countries, or it will have to dissolve or change.
And any
And that's what
questions?
is pending, right, with Trump.
Is there
That's pretty
anyway
much pending.
any questions going on in the chat?
Let me see. No. Well, Lenny is in there, and he remarked, "Shouldn't we just all call it weather change?" And I responded
Oh,
with,
yeah.
"Yeah, that's what the weather does. It changes all the time."
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
to call it weather change, wouldn't that just to be the same as calling it weather? Calling weather? Well, yeah, I guess that's what we're doing. But
Yes, that's true.
oh,
Definitely.
I'm in my I'm getting in my philosophy mood now. Let's just turn that down a notch because then we'll segue out into all sorts of other topics. Um, so yeah, we were talking about Starforts today. This all came from
That
us.
was the general idea, and then we went to the South Pole, and that's sort of where everything went haywire. I don't know.
Oh, it was just because you remarked that someone mentioned, or someone could say that they're not on the South Pole, and that was
That's
where we
it.
came
Yeah,
from.
full
Yeah,
circle again. There we are.
there we are. Okay,
Back,
so what
back
I
to where
wanted
we
to,
began.
what I just basically wanted to announce is that Fenton, Colm, Mike, and I have joined forces, and we are on starforts.org uploading our resources, and we are putting together the largest Starfort map ever. I've said this before, but I'm updating people on the work. We are basically in the process of uploading maps to tie in with, when I say maps, it's all the small maps of small Starforts and whatnot. We're going to tie them to the large map on Google Earth, so you can go around in Google Earth, and then there will be Starfort pins there inside the Google Earth, and you can see where they all are. Over 5,000 we have mapped so far. And then you click on the icon, and then an old map I have found, or someone else in our Discord has found, will pop up, and you can compare the old map with how it looks today. So you can see both that it was a Starfort once and how the mapping was accurate, how the topography has changed also, which is also very interesting in terms of the mud flood catastrophe, which we also talk about a lot in Tartary research, because you can see in a lot of instances that the ground level has risen, and that is very interesting. But yeah, the map is coming up soon. The work coming up, and what we're doing now is tying all the maps from the archives to the larger map, which is going to take some time because there are over 6,000 maps that we're sorting and tying and uploading. So it's going to take some time. Mike was conservatively stating some months last time, but I think it will take some few more months to get that done. Don't you think, Mike?
I don't have a good indication of how fast this will be done. It's mainly Western Europe currently that has so many maps available that it looks like a lot of work, but most of the other countries only have a few maps. So getting through Europe will be sort of the biggest part.
Mm.
And how long it takes, I don't really know.
Yeah, it will take some time. Fenton, he said he would do France for us,
Yeah,
which was like,
Fenton said he's working on France, which is an incredible job because that alone is 1,100 maps
yeah.
of the 6,000, near 6,000 maps we currently have saved to the server.
There's no doubt that France with Holland and Germany and Belgium, perhaps a bit, are the Starfort capitals of the world.
So far, yes, considering the amount we have located and the old maps we have, but then there are a lot more hiding still in Eastern Europe and
And Germany.
Germany, probably Poland, the Ukraine,
Oh, did you see the Ukraine regional maps I found? Where when you zoom in, it's just there's star forts and star cities everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah. I already have a couple of region maps of the Ukraine and
But also
have worked on it
Hungary
a
and
bit, but
Italy.
that's just what I indicated earlier.
I've also had an
Everywhere you
idea,
see an
Mike.
empty space, everywhere that has an empty space is just a space that I haven't researched yet.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also scary to think about all the potential new stars we're gonna locate. But I also had this idea yesterday, Mike, that we should take as many of the region maps we can in the same, let's say, elevation from the ground, so to speak, the same dimensions, and put them side by side to show like this is how the ancient world looked like, because that would be crazy.
Yeah, that's a project in itself that requires someone with a whole lot of Photoshop skills. And you want to like create a sort of a Europe overlay or something like that, you
Yeah,
mean?
like a Europe overlay in some sort in one dimension, like, or perhaps just take one regional map from each country in the Central Europe and just show that they had the same concentration of star cities almost.
We could maybe ask Lee.
Hmm. And that's not a bad idea.
Lee is fairly good with the photo stuff. He may be able to do that. I don't know for sure, and that is going to involve a whole lot of cutting and pasting and referencing for sure. But it is an interesting idea, definitely,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially over areas like France, the Netherlands, Belgium. These really densely populated countries.
Yeah. And it's just crazy. So yeah, the reason one I found of the Netherlands was is just still blowing my mind how many forts and star cities there were. It's just unbelievable. And yeah, I'm seeing stars quite
Hey, I'm looking at it.
figuratively and literally.
I'm literally looking at the map right now.
Uh, and it's yeah, it's going to be stunning when it's all done. And when we release it, it will be perhaps, I would say it's a very unique thing. Something like this has never been done before, and the amount of work behind it is a lot.
Yeah. All things combined, we're looking at thousands of hours of work. Um, I make reference of this in the map legend.
Yep. Yep, that's the map legend is in the Pacific Ocean of his map. There's a large blue star, and you can click on it, and it will show some information about the map. How many have you are actually engaged right now with the map? Is it the autodidactic, Fenton, Calm, you and I, and who else have the KMC?
Um, I'm pretty sure that Mike Stellium has it,
Oh yeah, right.
or a fairly recent version because he did a recent shout out to my work.
Yep.
Thank you for that. Who are the other? But there's a couple of people that have a version of this map, but as far as I'm aware, it's just Fenton that has the complete or most recent version of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
true.
the most recent version sort of only means that um, most all pins, except for a couple I just noted, that have been changed into stars with a
Mm.
coloring system, which is explained in the legend again.
Yep. And you just finished Japan, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Oh yeah, so really, I remember 6 months ago when you were moaning about the relabeling project.
Yep. I was, and now that is done, and now we're tying stars to old maps, which is again going over all of these pins and adding stars where possible. If there is
Yep.
an old map available for said star, we add the map.
Yep. And
And once
and
once it once it gets published, we will probably upload another video explaining what the stars are about and what the coloration does.
yep, that's true, man. That will probably be something that we'll do on our YouTubes respectively. So yeah, our my YouTube, the Boogeyman, just uploaded an hour before going live here, so check that out if you want to. Um, my channel is I will link it in the chat on the freedomslips.com chat. You can see it in there. I'll link it in 5 minutes time or so. And also be sure to go into our website freedomslips.com and find a way to donate because we are listener supported and we really need your help to continue to do what we're doing. So without the listener, there would be no Radio Tartary or no Revolution Radio at all. So please, guys, please go in and find a way to donate on the website at freedomslips.com. So yeah, and my YouTube channel is the Bugge Man, Bugge Man. And I upload a lot of Tartary related videos. And I also upload the conversations we have here on the radio onto there with videos or with pictures that relates to our talk, so to speak. Sometimes I do that, and sometimes I'm more lazy and just put in miscellaneous photos or pictures. But yeah, something to look out for is I sometimes just I put related stuff on the pictures when we do certain talks. But depending on how good the talk is, because as this one is, we're talked about Starforts, so and a lot of other stuff, so that would be all over the place. I was hope or I had planned for Nathan Amaro today because we are going to initiate something we'll be talking about here on the radio, which is America was part of Tartaria in the ancient days or in the old world before Columbus, so-called, discovered it. And we're going to substantiate that idea with a lot of evidence, and what we can show, we will, what we cannot, it's not every piece of evidence we'll be able to give to you through the radio because it is audio only. But we'll talk about as much of the literary evidence that we can, and talk about which references we're using. So to the best of our efforts, but we have a lot of old research done like half a year ago, which is it's hard sometimes to exactly remember which reference was what, but we're still sorting it out. We have a lot of research going on into the topic, and we'll basically be showing you guys on the upcoming shows. So that will be Nathan and I, and Mike knows Nathan very well as well. And we three have been working a lot. Also with Exertus to do all sorts of things, and Nathan has another project with a guy called Jonathan McPheeps, I think.
Mac Teams.
McTeams, yeah. Jonathan has some excellent videos on Tartary or ancient Moors or ancient Israelites in America, as evidenced by the Bible in Obery. And if that sounds intriguing, then please go and check that out, the Obery series on YouTube. OBRY with large capital letters. OBRY. Obery. And yeah, he will basically talk about stuff you have never considered before in your life. And it's quite on the cutting edge of revisionist history, I'd say. And it's basically using the Bible to claim what we have been looking for all along. Where's the Holy Land? And the Holy Land was in America. And the Bible is the best source of that information, which is odd, because they're using the Bible to claim that it is in Palestine, even though they talk about the Temple Mount, which would be in the Bible described as a large mountain. And what do you have in Palestine? I don't really see a large mountain anywhere. So it doesn't really qualify, and America just fits the biblical description of the Holy Land much more. So,
it was a nice Starfort at one point.
Yeah. We even found out that Jerusalem and Palestine had a Starfort. Yeah, quite amazing. Which would blow the whole Starfort narrative apart once again. With
once again,
it's perhaps. Oh, do you remember how Bob the Science Guy he mentioned Starforts? He showed a picture or a photo of a Starfort, and he said, like, jokingly, I guess, to Max Egan in response to him that, don't you ever, he didn't say that, but his eyes were saying that, don't you dare look into Starforts. And then he said, like, we know who built them and what they used them for. So that's that. Paraphrasing here. But yeah, that was him just brushing over Starforts as everyone else has done. Just brushed over them. Oh yeah, Bastion forts. We know who built them and what they were used for and yada yada yada.
And yada yada yada.
The reality is just the opposite. No one knows anything about them when it really comes down to it. And you cannot find an original source of a historical person or writer who also claimed to build Starforts. It just doesn't exist unless you want to go into the Latin language. And it would seem that Kircher actually has a story about a Starfort construction in his book about magnetics. So I'll repeat that. Kircher, the learned Jesuit, in Latin writes about Starfort construction under the section of his book in magnetics, which is very interesting. It would seem that, as I have found in a lot of other Starfort books on Gallica, there is a geomancy element to them. And imagine Old Versailles Park, right, Mike? Mm-hmm. And you're walking around the large symmetrical park of Versailles, the big, grandiose, flamboyant ones. And in the middle of it, you have a Starfort that's sunken into the ground, so it doesn't even, stick too much up from the ground. And it's completely like all the other Starforts we're used to seeing, and it's just in the middle of a large garden or park. So what are we supposed to think about that? It just doesn't fit the narrative. Like, why would you? It's not even in a defensive position. It's just in the middle of a park, surrounded by trees. There's even trees growing inside of it. How are you supposed to really to think about Starforts after that? Because as far as I'm concerned, I have seen Starforts in all sorts of contexts: draining water, irrigation. On the top of mountains, as communication centers, as commerce centers.
If you take the war narrative, and you then take the density of Starforts and then just the old stuff, right? You can sort of discount all the yellow ones, all the circle cities. Just discount these circles because they don't appear on the old maps to begin with. Even then, if you take the density of just these two maps I poured over in Germany.
Yep.
What were these people fighting about? Like, really, what were these people fighting about? Because every city was at war with each other or something?
Yeah.
What was the countryside in these times? Just a band of roving nomads that went to war with every city they saw? It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever.
And then if you have bastions pointing outwards some direction, then in other instances they point inwards towards the city, as if the city was defending itself from itself. How? I was nearly swearing there because I'm out there now. I'm getting pissed.
Pissed. But the official narrative makes about as much sense as, dare I say, tits on a fish? Yeah, I dare say.
There you say tits on a fish. Yeah, you can say that. Please say that some more.
Because
that's as much sense as it makes.
You fortify the city of Amsterdam and then you leave the seaside open.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because that is what all these old maps show. Like you look at Amsterdam and like the whole seaside is open. It's just docks.
Yep. I even think that's the case for Malmö. Like
Malmö in Sweden. It's the same deal.
Yeah. You leave the whole seaside not fortified and level to the water, so the enemy can just sail in there and say, "Screw your bastions."
Where did the enemy come from in these days, according to history?
Oh, the water.
Oh yes, the sea.
Oh yeah.
No, but that's okay. I mean, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to make all of these cities circles, because all you need to do is defend from the land, because the land is filled with roving nomads that will come and set your city ablaze.
And don't you find it also funny that it would seem that with a lot of border disputes, countries are fighting over getting the border just right there so they can have a Starfort on their side, and the other country is doing the same, right? So it would seem like, why are you, also in ancient days, why are you fighting over borders just to gain Starforts if you could just build them yourselves? And then they say, well, they stopped building Starforts there and there. And I'm okay, then go to Paraguay in 1860s, or what was it, 70s, something like that. Paraguayan wolves.
1860s or 1870s, Humaita map. Yep.
Yeah, they apparently in Paraguay, which would be the third world in 200 years ago, they decided to build a Starfort because of the war. So why couldn't Germans in the same period do the same? Why didn't they do the same? Just
well, because all these third world countries have been using old technology, right? They're behind on us.
Oh yeah, so what were the Germans? So how had Germans advanced from them then? Back then in the 1860s, let's say, how had and if you advance from that point, why didn't they just build more advanced Starforts?
Well, that's another one that sort of goes against the narrative, right? Kronstadt near St. Petersburg is an interesting case.
Of a highly or New Breisach or
no, it's not. I don't mean in that case. More like they stuffed the whole Kronstadt area with anti-air.
Oh yeah, right.
And the given narrative is that a Starfort became useless when the aeroplane came about.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
right?
Yeah, right.
Because you can't possibly drop bombs from dirigibles. That is impossible. But no, the whole Kronstadt area.
Why do we even have, Mike? Sorry to cut you off. We have stamps and pictures of in Napoleonic settings using dirigibles to drop bombs on star cities back in the 1700s.
There's no other way, in my mind at least, and I'm a simple man. There's no other way in my mind that they had something to go about and draw these things from above, because not everybody was Leonardo da Vinci walking through Imola.
Yeah.
It's just about as simple as I can put it.
And you even have in the 16 and 1500s aerial views of cities that could only have been done if you saw them from above. And how would you do that in the 15 and the 1600s? Oh, well, you just use a dirigible, and then they say no, Montgolfier and that Portuguese guy and were the first to do so. And then you can find a lot of evidence in the archives. I found plenty of ancient air balloons and dirigibles way before. Even Martin Liedtke showed a Roman bas relief of helium air balloon and Romans. So that narrative is also officially destroyed by themselves, and it's just take a review of all the evidence, and it destroys itself.
The Kronstadt area I mentioned is more like World War II. They tried to get to St. Petersburg, and they basically stuffed the whole of the Kronstadt area with anti-air. And the Germans had the toughest of times bombing St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg was sort of that holy place for Russians. Nobody was going to get to St. Petersburg. They fought to the death for that place.
Yep. Yeah, I'm also just laughing about it because the narrative is just it just grows and grows more crazy.
Starting giving a shout out to the Stolen History forum again, stolenhistory.org. They have a really good topic on the history of St. Petersburg, which was interesting to begin with because this is yet another city that is supposedly built on a swamp.
Yep, like Amsterdam.
Like Amsterdam, Copenhagen, as we can see in the old maps, was a lot of water before it became Copenhagen.
Yep, that's
and
true.
It just goes to question like what kind of mastery did we have over the water? Because they always say like the Dutch were the masters of water, and I think like the Dutch
that would be the Phoenician legacy in Holland.
That's the Phoenician legacy in Holland, probably.
Yeah, even Hugo, some guy, if you've seen his recent video on part 6 of Antiquitech in Amsterdam, he shows that a lot of the decorations on the buildings are actually of Mongolians and Tartarians. And, I think the whole area where Amsterdam is in Holland right now used to be called Batavia on the old maps.
Yeah, that's all Batavia. Basically, what happened was William of Orange came over from England and proclaimed all the lands he saw as his own. And to put it really simple, right, the Batavi
He was in Habsburg, right?
He was a Habsburger, yeah, correct.
Yep.
And the Batavi were like, well, sure, as long as we can go ahead and fish and work our lands and stuff. Go right ahead, man. And that is sort of that is still that Dutch mentality. Like, no, we don't want to fight war. Oh, you need our country. Well, shit, we don't have an army. Okay, go ahead as long as you don't demolish it all. Because at first, like in World War II, I'm making it funny, but like in World War II, we were again like in World War I, we declared neutrality, and Hitler this time really wanted the Netherlands, quote unquote. So what he did was bomb Rotterdam and then threatened to do the same with Amsterdam, and the Dutch government was like, no, okay, just keep things intact, okay? You can build your V2 bases and all that stuff and take your bunkers, but please leave Amsterdam alone.
Yep. That's how we've been told about it as well. But I also just wanted to mention that after Venice lost power in the Middle Ages, there was a shift, and it moved up north to Holland. And from, I'd say, the late 1500s till 1680, until the Bank of England was created, Holland and the Netherlands were basically the seat of the empire, so to speak, the Phoenician Empire.
That is
and
correct, sir.
It was the first bourse or commercial house in Europe, and it was established by them, the Fondi of Venice.
Yeah, the Wall Street of Europe back in the Golden Age.
Yep. That was where also the free thinkers of the world were gathered. All the philosophers who were fleeing from dogmatic ideologies. For instance, Spinoza, the Jewish, very, 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 very interesting philosopher who is gaining a lot of traction in modern times. He's been discarded for over 100 years by modern philosophy, and now, as they have seen quantum mechanics take full effect, Spinoza suddenly became interesting again. And that will be in the pending column for philosophy, as I think we will see a Spinoza revival will gain traction a lot. He is both very scientific minded, not that he performs science, but he's very meticulous, very orderly. If you've ever read his ethics, it's extremely well put together. Everything is listed as a law book, paragraph from paragraph. Very concise in every statement. Concise as you can be when you write in metaphysics, because it's not going to be concise in the way that you want it to be, but concise is very, modest in philosophy, because if you read Søren Kierkegaard, it will be like pages of pages without a comma or a Spinoza is very concise compared with some of those guys, and I think he will gain traction. But going from Amsterdam and Holland being the Phoenician capital in the Baroque and the late Renaissance, so to speak, in their chronology, then it lost power and they moved to London from there. And in the meantime, there was like this legacy in your country left. And I find it very interesting that you have the mastery of water, and you have the colonization aspect of it. You have the Dutch East Trading Company.
Yeah, the East India Trading Company.
Yep, but there was a distinct Dutch company, and there was a distinct British. And you also had a Danish one, and it continues to exist in a form called the Dansk Indisk Company, the Danish East Indian Company. And basically it's about all those East Indian companies were about pillaging and, taking everything the East had and moving it to the New World. They are stealing from Tartary.
Selling it at top prices, because like pepper and tulips and all of that stuff just became like more valuable than gold at certain points in time.
Yeah, that's true. And it's very funny that you have all that going on in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands during that period, because that was the exact same status the Netherlands had there was enjoyed by Venice just a few decades prior. And Venice was in this very peculiar position because even though it was part of the West, so to speak, it was part of Europe, it was politically and legally considered part of the East. So Eastern laws governed there. It was like the Vatican did not have jurisdiction there, so to speak.
Like northern, especially the eastern part of northern Italy, there's a lot of communist towns still to this day.
And the communist towns today would denote some of the Eastern heritage, the modern Eastern heritage, not the ancient Tartarian, but more of the modern stage of civilization. And I would think that communism is just a stage coming from the very, very low grades of civilization. You're slowly getting up on your legs, and communism is one of those stages, or a communist-like society. based or coming out of capitalistic ideals, which the communists really need capitalism to exist, if you think about it, because without it, communism would have never been fought up. So they need each other. Like it's interesting because that special position Venice occupied as being part of the East was really the old world power. So it was like the East had its little parasite in the West controlling the West and the East at the same time. And the Vatican and Rome only looks strong now, and they've inserted themselves in history, but it would seem that Venice was far more powerful than Rome was, and Rome was like a scapegoat or a religious opium house to cull the people, while all the business was handled in Venice by the doges or the dogs, which is also very interesting that they would call themselves that, because where did you have dog-headed people? In Tartary. And who discovered Tartary from the West? Oh, it was a Venetian explorer, right? Marco Polo. And it's very funny about Marco Polo. They only mention him, but he had two brothers accompanying him in his travels. So the three Polo brothers were gone for 17 years, and they were thought dead after 3 or 4 years. So they didn't expect them to ever come home again. And when they did arrive, they arrived in Tartarian clothing.
Arrive,
and no one...
sorry, as a shout out to Andreas, that immediately made me think of the Three Amigos.
Yeah, the Three Musketeers. But
and
apparently
it made me
one of them
think
died.
of Los Pollos.
Los Pollos, yeah, right. But one of them died, apparently. So some people only remember there were two Polo brothers, but there were three who took off and two returned. The third brother died early on the travels. Can't remember from what. And they kind of left him on the travels, I would think. I can't really remember that detail too well. But when they got back home to Venice, they arrived in Tartarian clothing, and no one recognized them, and they had forgotten about them. So it took some time to convince the people that they were actually the Venetian brothers. And one of the details mentioned was that they couldn't even speak the language. They had turned Tartarian, like fully Tartarian. They spoke in Tatar to them when they got home. They knew that it was their home, but they had forgotten their language, which is also kind of suspicious. But nevertheless, Marco Polo writes his chronology over Tartary, and the funny thing about it is, what would you say, is Marco Polo like a hero of Western civilization, or is he a loser in the history of Western civilization? Would you see him as perceived by the general population to be like a good, awesome dude who brought us forward, or a loser who just shouldn't be looked into? What is the general perception of him?
No, the former.
That would be someone who contributed to our vast knowledge. Okay. Well, don't you find it also funny that when you dig about his account on Tartary, it says that it's not credible. So they're actually calling him a liar. Isn't that funny? When it comes to just Tartary, it's not credible and he is a liar. But they don't tell people about that. But if you really push them, they have to say it, because in his account on Tartary, he mentions all sorts of things you're not supposed to know about. So it's easier to just say that account was just fanciful and blah blah blah, and he lied, and but he's simultaneously a hero. Well, I guess it's not a contradiction that they would put liars up as heroes, but not in that way, like not overtly. Like they're calling him a liar and simultaneously calling him a hero, whilst not telling anybody about that he lied, not overtly. Like only few people even know about that the account was of Tartary. Most people think, oh, he wrote something about China. Huh? No, it was about Tartary. It was about the Khan of Tartary, not the Khan or the King of China or the Emperor of China, the Khan of Tartary.
Mm-hmm.
And he even wrote that they had legal paper tender money. So the origin of what Venice did in Europe was already in place in Tartary. So the Venetians created the insurance and banking and all these legal tender systems. It's Venetian inspired and put to use in Holland and the Renaissance, and later blown to full out of proportion in London, in the city of London, and that's still continuing. And it's all from Tartaria. So I guess when you see those white dragons in the city of London, and when they, parade Gog and Magog through the temple bar each year, they're really telling you something there. They're telling you that they all harped on Tartary. And it's very easy to trace that back from the Venetian explorer, Marco Polo. And Venice occupying its special grant as being part of the East, even being in the West, and being more powerful than the Vatican.
Don't mind us. We took all this stuff, and now we're parading it in your face. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, and they're even telling you that the country that they took it from doesn't even exist as a country and never did. I guess that's why they have to tell that their hero is also a liar. But only if you pressure that point, of course. Isn't that crazy? And it's very easy to prove and document. And it's just like, I wonder what a historian would say.
The problem is that hardly anybody cares.
Yeah.
We were just having a thing about Walter Bosley. Is it Walter Bosley?
Yeah, Walter Bosley. Yep.
In the Discord. Yeah. And at first I argumented that maybe he's pissed off because we came on really strong. Flavor Town comes back, and he's right in what he's saying. So, right, if he's getting aggro, he's reaping what he's sown.
Well, he also typed in, Flavor Town wrote today on Discord, he's probably just mad because he didn't capitalize on the hype first.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to, and that's where my statement comes before that. It's like, that's usually the problem with any type of denier. Like, you're more than willing to criticize someone's viewpoints, but then doing actual research into debunking those claims, no, that's too much of an effort, man. I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
So yeah. You're willing to go out on a limb to tell somebody that he's wrong, but then you're not willing to go and actually tell that person why he's wrong with some actual facts.
Nope. It's just easier, I guess, if you make YouTube videos to tell what some people want to hear, and then don't substantiate it, and just assert an opinion. Don't back it up, and just tell people what they want to hear, and get a few thousand views, monetize on that, and it's very easy.
I don't think there's a lot of money to be made from YouTube, so it's really a matter of getting your sort of misinformation
out there. Think about Andreas when he went around Spain. His only income was YouTube, and he got 2,000 views on his videos. So it goes to show that I know he had other resources as well already in place, but still that was what he did.
Is that his Patreon account, or is that YouTube paying out?
It's both Patreon and YouTube, of course.
From what I gather, like, making a YouTube account to actually make a living is sort of the dumbest idea you had nowadays.
Yeah, because it's already been done by so many people, and the competition is so tough.
And then you got those advertisement and child-friendly video deal if you're videos are deemed not friendly for kids, you're demonetized on a regular. Like if I make my video not suited for children, I won't get my channel banned, but I won't get any advertisements. So thusly, I won't make any money off of YouTube. Not that
Yep.
I was there to make money off of YouTube to begin with, but that's beside the point. Like it's been made impossible to make a revenue from just having videos. You need like a supportive audience behind you
Yeah, I agree.
that sort of pays you out monthly with sort of thing like a Patreon account. And you don't have to make a whole lot of money if all you do is travel. The
True.
moment you have to pay rent and are tied to this system like properly, you have a job and taxes and all that kind of stuff. Sure, that's when that income won't provide. But
Yeah, I know what
you
you
don't
mean.
have these things. You don't need a lot of income.
True. Yeah, but yeah, in Andreas's case, it was the only possible income was also, giving back to his YouTube channel. And right now he's doing a part 2 in the travel area. He's on Bermuda and filming all
Yes.
sorts of things. And
Lots of
it's very
stuff
interesting to
on
document
Bermuda.
such things, yeah. He just recently visited a Starfort. Did you see that?
Yeah. There's many
What
more.
did you think about that?
The whole of Bermuda is filled with Starforts.
And what is the narrative on those Starforts?
The events of the islands, like every Caribbean island has that excuse.
Mm-hmm.
It was built by the Spanish or the conquerors to defend their island. It's funny, you got Danish forts, Spanish forts, Dutch forts in the Caribbean.
Yep, St. Thomas was Danish.
The U.S. Virgin Islands were Danish.
Yep.
So the forts have Danish names, but they look similar in structure to the Spanish ones, and they look similar in structure to the Dutch ones.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, it doesn't really matter where you go.
They just look similar.
With a couple of exceptions, most of them look similar.
Yep. There's no unique style. It's all the same style found everywhere, and with
Well,
a
it's not all the
few
same. I
variations.
wouldn't say like the same style. India, I think, is the best example of the variety of build styles in what most of us still call fortifications.
Yeah, but even in Japan, where you have that other type of style, you still find the regular style found in France and the US,
Yep.
So it's very interesting because the first thing people talk about in Starfort related research is that they're found everywhere, and since you have the same building, let's say it was like a type of house with, it had a chimney there and the roof was spaced like this and had this form. Imagine you found the same house everywhere you went on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
right? What would that make you think?
Well, that's sort of
So,
the same. It's the same deal, right? It's the Tartary build style.
yep, because that is also the same case that you find the same grandiose buildings, especially the government buildings. It's the same style. But imagine if you found like small houses in the same style everywhere, because that's kind of like what a small 4-point readout is, uh, and you find them everywhere.
Yeah.
And it shows a uniform or unified style, these shared knowledge all over the world in ancient times, and it also showed that a certain state of civilization was possible back then, and we don't even know when that was or how they even built a Starfort. It's just not known. And
No, we
I
have
guess that's why.
we have that one image. Oh, excuse me there. We have that one image of a bunch of guys, soldiers actually, digging it out of the rock.
Yep. And also I have actually a few pictures that show that they first do use mud and earthworks and trees, and then they create like a shell of the Starfort with that, and then they lay over stones, which is kind of course, logical. Like, it's not that I say people cannot figure out how to build the exact same thing. It's just that it's not documented that anyone in history ever did that, at least not in detail. I know where Vauban exists and so forth, but if anyone can really find like a guy who
Yeah, but
says,
like
I
Vauban
am
came.
this guy, I lived here and here, and I built a Starfort in such and such manner. If that exists, please, please send me that.
Vauban built the small style fortifications, of which you see a whole bunch in France. But
Yeah,
Vauban never went to Asia. Vauban never went to
but
Siberia,
but can you even
Norway.
find a reference or a citation from Vauban himself saying, I built the Starfort like
No,
this, I
no, no,
used
no,
these
no,
techniques?
no such thing. Don't get me wrong there, but
Nope.
it's like he was never there. Vauban worked for Napoleon, and Napoleon never went to the UK.
And why are the Starforts in the UK then?
And the UK and Ireland are both plunked full of Starforts.
Yep. Like Tilbury Fort near London is one example. And they say Tilbury defended London, but why would you then build it
Tilbury, yeah,
outside of the city?
Tilbury is the one fort they claim defended London, but then there's a whole bunch of batteries that are around the London area. There is a whole fortification system leading into the Thames. So before you even got to London, you got completely shot to bits.
Yep. And that reminds me that we and Hugo, some guy, go to YouTube and find Hugo space some guy in one word, and you'll find a very good YouTube channel for Tartary related research. And he joined our Discord very recently, and we're going to make a collaborative movie with him soon where we will show him our map and the Paris situation, because it's a story in itself with all the Starforts around Paris. And perhaps that will inspire Hugo to actually go out and film these places and see if he can go out and get some tours or something like that. Because it's always good to have things documented from the ground with your intents and purposes, right?
Definitely. And Paris is indeed, like you said, fairly unique in that its whole ring of defense, its whole first ring of defense, and this is one of the few cities that has
2 rings.
two rings of defense, but its first ring of defense consists of 5-pointed starforts that are most all intact.
Yep.
If not rebuilt on, because Fort Dissy is now sort of the business hub of Paris.
Yeah. But it still has the star shape, doesn't it?
It's still built on the 5-pointed star. There's all kinds of modern buildings on it, but yeah, if you look at it from above, you can still see it's built on a literal star fort,
Yep.
and they surround
Yep.
the entirety of Paris, basically.
And Paris had itself from the city 33 kilometers of bastion wall surrounding the Paris.
Yeah, correct.
And also Paris is perhaps the best example of mud flood that has ever been found, because in the middle of Paris, in an area called Les Halles or Les Halles,
Les
Halle,
Halles.
Les Halles, okay. Le Hall. Yeah, I guess that was where we got to. And I just came from France. This is so embarrassing. Sorry, Frenchies out there. I know you're very sensitive about pronunciation French or pronunciation of French.
Say
So
hi.
sorry.
I
Le Hall.
don't know. I'm Dutch.
Yeah, that whole area was in the 70s dug out and destroyed. There was like an old market there, and they destroyed that, and they dug 100 feet below ground. And on the side, and the photos taken on the side, you could see that there was a city beneath the city, and I'm not kidding. Like old walls and buildings and columns and windows and doors, um, 50 to 100 feet below current street level. And it all was exposed in that excavation in the center of Paris. And what is quite apparent is that below the city of Paris is the so-called Roman city called Lutetia. And it's even admitted on the Wikipedia that Paris was built on top of an old Roman city. But no one
That's
really
Lutetia.
stops. Yeah, Lutetia, yeah. No one really stops to question, well, how do you build a city on top of another city? People think that, oh, you build it on top of the ruins, so you're building it on top of old foundations. No, no,
Funny
no.
how those Monty Python guys weren't all that far off with their Scottish castle in the mud.
Nope. They were actually quite probably 100% on. They were not off, they were on.
Yep.
And I've met John Cleese once. He was a witty chap, let's say. I think that was what he would think of me if he had remembered when he met me or when I met him. It was quite a funny conversation we had over lost wine and cheese knives on the Radisson Hotel. But I digress on that. That's a little bit too private. But yeah, the castle in the mud. Like, how do you brush over the fact that they say they built Paris on top of Lutetia, and no one really stops to question, like, how was that done, and what exactly is meant? Because it's not meant that they're building new buildings on top of old foundations. No, they're actually building a city on top of the old skyscraper line of the old city. So where they had the old tall buildings in the old city, that is where the top of the old buildings is the bottom of the new buildings. That's what they're saying. And how is that possible? How is an entire city either sunken into the ground or buried? That is the question of the mud flood. And it is a whole topic in itself. And Paris is the best example of it because it's so clear. And the effect of it is so, the magnitude in Paris is astonishing. It's hundreds of feet of mud that covered an ancient city, and the city is still intact down there beneath the street level of Paris. I recently got in contact with an old friend through research who told me, I remember he told me before knowing about the mud flood, I think, that his father had once told him that the city where I live in Denmark, Aarhus, it was common knowledge once that there is a city beneath the city. And so I remembered that, and I asked him recently what was the details of that. And apparently his father used to work in the Danish train company. We only have one state-sponsored train company. We have one other, but it's nearly a monopoly. So DSB it's called. And when they laid down the tracks for Aarhus, I think it was 60 to 80 years ago, they dug out a lot of the city, and his father told him when he was young that they basically had to put the whole process into stops a few times because they found stuff down there. And it was basically said that there was a city below the city, and they had to, destroy a lot of stuff to lay the tracks. So, and it was common knowledge in Aarhus. It was his impression that it is common knowledge amongst people living in Aarhus that there is a city beneath the city. And the same case with another Danish city where my parents live, in Vejle. and we have no mountains in Denmark. We don't have a topography that supports large amounts of mud coming out of nowhere and covering entire cities. So where did
Copenhagen
it came from?
has a lot of underground, doesn't it?
Who? Copenhagen?
Yeah.
Who? Yeah, it does.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know that for a fact. I know that for a fact.
So yeah,
My
Copenhagen has a lot of underground. Aarhus has an underground. Vejle, like you said, where your parents live, has underground. And then we found fairly recently that city. What was its name? Near Nyborg.
yeah, Knutshoven.
Knutshoven. Yeah. Well, if that is sunken as well.
Well, what would you think? Would you do you still you still have the same conclusion about Knutshoven as we in our video, right?
That's the city. That's the Starfort there. Like you look at those lines, that golf course and everything that leads off of it.
Yeah, it just screams that the map that we found is accurate, or
It's
it
a
used to depict something.
canal-like structures, and you've got those. I don't know.
We wouldn't have
Well-organized
seen it.
lines and stuff.
Like it's a case where we wouldn't have known it or seen it if we hadn't come across the map. We would have seen certain features in the landscape and said, yeah, kind of Starforty.
I may have ran into that readout.
Yeah, you already did. I remember you had the readout when I first was like, did I ever show you this?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, yeah, I have a readout there, so you knew about the readout. But if we had seen all the other lines we found afterwards, before finding the map, we would have thought nothing of it. We would just have said, yeah, probably part of some old lines or something.
The field system that Fenton mentions would have come to mind, I think, and that's where it would have ended.
Yeah, but we would have never seen that. We would never have seen like a huge star city that
agreed.
map presents.
Agreed.
Yeah. So the map was really what put us on that search, and I'm very eager to go out sailing with my dad in a couple of weeks, and actually go out with a shovel and see if I can find some of the old walls. But if it's still, some Starforts are still, nothing is left of them besides an imprint.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be the case that I'm only going to find dirt. But if that's the case, we're still going to have those features as seen from above.
For that reason, I marked Aarhus because it has a cathedral.
Yeah.
Sitting in the center, it has that pretty wavy pattern going on. Mm-hmm. It has the canals. It has the garden structure. So yeah, it has a lot of hallmarks of having been a fortified town in the past.
Yeah. But I would still think it would be more modest of us not to include Aarhus because we don't have any confirmation other than all the features of a normal star city is there.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, Mike, if we looked hard enough, we could find old cities that have wavy patterns and cathedrals and canals that was never a Starfort. And I think that's possible. I think that's possible.
I'm beginning to be of the suspicion that every town at one point had a fortification, and not necessarily a star-shaped fortification, but
I think
even if only a bastion point. The beginning of the episode sort of already threw in the water under the bus. That the bastion narrative. Why would you make bastions off of a steep cliff? Nobody is going to attack your bastion point there, regardless of it just being a wall or a bastion point. That already makes no sense. You have a bunch of towns, of which I have maps in the Netherlands, that only had 1 or 2 bastion points, and other than that, just a circled wall. Why would you still have the bastion points then? What were they doing?
No one
Was it
knows.
sort of like, yeah, well, if we build the bastion point here, the enemy will attack us here because this is the best part of the fortifications of our town. That they're not at all going to attack from the back where we have none of these. I mean, call me sort of the skeptic here, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to build two of these things and then just give up.
Yeah, it's just it blows the entire narrative
I mean
because
that pretty meme that Flavortown made. But sir, the star-shaped fortifications will bankrupt our town. Shut up and take my money.
yeah,
Because there's a whole
everyone.
bunch of historical narratives. Geneva springs to mind in Switzerland, where the fortifications bankrupted the city, and then a decade later they were torn down because of expansion of the city. Really, you didn't see that coming a decade ahead?
And also, how can you expand like so rapidly after being bankrupt?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just the craziest narrative ever. Do you remember the narrative of how they built Venice?
Yeah. Attila the Hun hunted all the farmers into the water and said, "Well, go fuck yourself." Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to do that on radio.
Well, it's okay, it's Studio B. But yeah, basically what Mike said that the Huns invaded Italy, all the Italians fled out into the water because the Huns were coming, so the last safe refuge were boats in the water because the Huns were horsemen, and they all clamped out there, and the Huns were like, "Oh, okay, I guess we'll stay on the land. They'll probably just die or something."
From
And then
from
from
from that point on, the Phoenicians gathered hundreds of thousands of trees, hammered them into the lake, and built a city on it.
yep,
One of the most magnificent cities on the planet.
yep,
Hmm.
that's what happened. That's what they say happened.
It's so
So
funny
basically,
that
they
nobody
say Attila the
notices.
Hun created Venice indirectly. So they say they actually say that Attila was the reason for Venice, but he wasn't exactly, part of the building. And it's just the craziest thing to think that some scared off Italians on the run from crazy Huns would just be casually erecting the most magnificent city Europe has ever seen. Like it's and don't touch the land, guys, because if you touch the land, you'll be decimated by Huns. So, so what resources do you exactly have to build like large cities of
So
stone out
that
in the water?
that is a fort that sits on the coast of uh, Venice, sort of Fort Marghera. That was then built by Attila the Hun to keep the Phoenicians out of Italy,
It
because
just
all those bastion points point towards Italy.
yeah,
I'm just saying.
yeah. It would look like Attila the Hun actually fortified that area to keep the Italians out of his area.
Hmm.
If we're yeah,
And then he put a couple of ring forts around the Marghera area to make sure that if the Italians went to land, they, yeah, yeah, it just makes more and more sense to me now.
yep. Like I'm just it's funny
I'm
to
just
really
being
think about
sarcastic
some of
here. I
these
mean,
narratives. Like especially the how they build Venice. Like maybe it sounds to me that it used to be known that actually Venice was built by Tatars because Genoa certainly has that connection. If you search for Liguria, ancient Liguria, which was the area around Genoa, you'll find that Liguria translated means Tartary, and that was something that Paul, the Black Sheep researcher, found out. So shout out to Paul from the Black Sheep researcher. He found that out. So Genoa and even Genoa has a griffin, which is the symbol of Tartary. It has a griffin on its crest, and it has which is even more funny. We talked about from Venice to London, right? From Venice to the city of London, and the
mhm.
city of London having its flag of a red cross on a white background. Well, that's also on the crest of Genoa with a griffin. And in the city of London, you have a dragon. And it's all, harping back to the East. And Venice occupied that special part of the East, even though it was in the West. And it created banking and legal tender money. And Marco, the Venetian explorer, found out that Kublai Khan, way before they knew what money was in paper form, actually had paper money there. And also before the conception of Venice. So do you see the story? Like how they stole from the East and created the new West based on
I'm just
principles
writing
of
notes.
the East? What?
I'm just writing notes, like money.
Yeah. So money is from there. Even the game Polo, enjoyed by civilized British people, so to speak, is from Tartary. I found that in an old article. It plainly states that the game of Polo was played by the wild Mongols in Tartary because they were horse masters. They stood on top of their horses and played polo. They were like polo experts. They could do it standing on the horses because there was in that part of Arabia and Tartary a very bold way of riding horses. They would stand with 2 feet on the backs of their horses while galloping. Yeah, it sounds crazy. I don't know if I believe it, but that's the given narrative. That's how crazy they were. Those savage barbarians. And they played polo, and so the British people thought they would create the most civilized sport ever from a Tartarian invention. Isn't that interesting? And also take all their money ideas and all their wealth. And even way before British civilized existence came about and people were sipping tea of fine porcelain, they were doing that in China and Tartary for thousands of years ago. From porcelain, because that's where porcelain is from. Porcelain is called China.
China.
So it seems to me that even the buildings and the castles in the UK are Tartarian inspired. So what about civilized British existence and the Great Britain is not actually just taken from Tartary, is my question. And it would seem not a whole lot can be found to not have come from Tartary. I might have said that a bit convoluted, but what I'm saying is that basically, without Great Tartary, there would have never been a Great Britain. And I think that's a very good note to end this show on, because we only have 4 minutes left until...
couple of minutes left, but yeah, I wanted to mention that, so...
Yeah, we'll round out talking about the new map, because that is what I want people to know right now, is that we are releasing the largest collection of Starforts in the world, all researched by us and the 4 minds who have labored the most with Starforts ever have gone together now, which is, or who is, Colm Gibney, Fenton, Mike, who I'm speaking with here, and myself. And we've joined forces and we're ready to do this and to show people the world of Starforts that they were never talked about or told about. And which it has to change.
Daddy, I want this in my history books. That's what I want to hear.
It has to change history. Because it's evidence that is undeniable. And unless you want to deny all historical data, you can deny all you want our findings, but you will also have to deny all other historical data on the same premise. So that's going to be a tough cookie. And it will force people to, especially in the academia and historians and so forth, it will force them to look upon history with new eyes, because you cannot escape from this Starfort history, and you cannot escape the contradictions that are in the narrative. It blows everything apart. It means that we need to start from square one. And what I want to have answered before I die is, why did they build Starforts? Who built them? And when did we ever lose the knowledge? those are my three main questions. Mike, do you have something to round up with?
I like to concur, sir. That would be sort of it's not a necessity, but it's nice to find out more and more that you can be certain of. As a lot of people ask me on average, like what's happening with the Starforts? Any new finds? And I always have to disappoint them by saying, well, we know they're everywhere. We know they were used for an advanced means of communication. We know they were used for the transportation and or mining of gas. And that's about all the things we are absolutely certain of. So the more we dig in, the more we find, and the more we find, the more we can confirm.
Well, the music has started, so I'm going to cut you off there.
Right.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Radio Tartary. See
Thanks
you,
for
Mike,
having
and
me.
cheers for joining me.
Cheers.